My name is Grace, and today I'm going to show you some small little art techniques that you can do at home with things you have around the house. So we're going to be using salt, ideally coarse salt. We want big chunks of rocks, and you will see why later. We will be using kitchen sponges, though if you do have any of these more natural sponges, these work even better. This is actually an art sponge, but a kitchen sponge will work just as good. We'll be using masking tape. Mine has little pictures on it, but it is essentially the same thing. It's nothing fancy, just your regular hardwood store masking tape. I'll also be using some dried flowers. These are pressed and it's very easy to do. You just put them in a heavy book with some tissue paper and a few layers of tissue paper if you don't want to stain your book with flower juices. But yeah, it's a very nice way to reuse your flowers once they have died. I find them very pretty. And paint. So the paints that I use are watercolors. You can buy them in these little kind of tub things, and they have different names, and that way you can kind of choose the colors that you want. But you can get very cheap kind of palettes, usually in the art supply stores of pound shops. They also come in pencils, so you can actually draw with these and then put water on top and they'll dissolve just like paint. And you can get, of course, the tubes of watercolor paint, which I don't have any of, but they work just as well. So yeah, whatever paints you have, you will find a way to work with them and to use these techniques with them, I hope. So let's get started. Okay, so firstly we start with paper types. So these are both cheap sketch pad pages that I got from pound shops. But there is a huge difference in the way they're reacting with the paint. So if you look at this one, you can see that there's these grey spots. It actually makes it really hard to see the yellow color. And it's quite thick paper, so it should in theory work, but it just doesn't go well with it. This paper, on the other hand, same cost, same quality, same kind of thickness, but there is no spotting in it, so I can see all the yellow color, and it makes it a lot easier to paint. So before you even start painting, I would highly recommend you just do little swatches with your brush. There doesn't even need to be any paint in it. If I just put water on this paper, it will start making those spots because it's just that the paper doesn't absorb water very well. Can you see them there? So yeah, just look out for the paper that you are using because it does really influence the quality of your work at the end. The other thing is watercolor paper is actually surprisingly easy to get now. A few years ago it was much harder, but most pound shops carry a little square or a pad or something of it. I got this from Tiger, which is obviously closed now, but you might have some at home, or your kids might have some, or they might just be some lying around the house, and it's very good. It will do the job of absorbing all of your paint, so you don't have to worry about this weird spotting that happens with cheaper quality paper. So to start our painting, we use the masking tape. Why would you need masking tape to paint? Well, because we're using water, it does funky things to the paper. I did this one earlier, I just did one shade on it, but as you can see, it's completely warped the shape of it. It has a curl to it now, and if I wanted to get this flat, I would have to spray it with water and put it between books, or it becomes a whole other thing that you have to do for your painting. The other thing is, with cheaper paper, this was the high quality paper that didn't do the spotting, it still had dents in it. So where you can see here where the color focused, that's just from the paper warping and the color sinking into the bottom of it. So yeah, we try to avoid that by sticking the page to our table with some masking tape. So I have here a page of the watercolor paper that I took out of my book, and you just take your masking tape, you measure out a rough length of it. I've actually found that sometimes even masking tape, it is a low stickiness tape, but even this sometimes has too much stickiness. So I wrap it around some skin, or you can do this on your pants or your shirt or some piece of fabric, whatever feels comfortable to you, and then I remove it so that there's one less sticky layer on it. So I will try to get it as even as possible along the top. Try to make sure that this gap and this gap are roughly the same so that it makes a nice straight line across the top. And we just stick it down to the table. You can do 2 strips across the top to make kind of a longer landscape scene. You can do all 4 so that it has a border, a white border around your painting. But yeah, I'll stick down the other sides and I will be right back. My corners have all been stuck down. Now, if you want to be really professional about it, you can measure out your, I don't know, 1 centimeter border and measure it out on all the corners, and that way they will all be exactly the same. But I'm not that picky about it, so I did just kind of eyeball it, and hopefully it'll turn out all right. So first of all, I want to show you how the different paints work. So we'll start with a pencil, because I think not many people know about watercolor pencils, and they're a nice medium because they're a lot less messy than actual watercolors. Just put down your color, you get your little brush with water, see it completely dissolves. You can get these at most art shops, and maybe some pound shops as well. They seem to have most things now. For the pans, you just dip your brush into the color with water, and you can place it down. If you want to fade a color, you clean your brush so that it has clean water on it now, and you can keep spreading it down. See, that way we make a gradient. You can even concentrate the top a little. Just like that, it has a nice flow to it. The techniques I really want to show you today kind of involve household things. So the first one I'm going to do is the salt one. Just to demonstrate it, I'm going to put down a wash of this blue color. I'm going to try and make it concentrate so that the salt effect really stands out. It's quite good. You don't want it to be too wet, because basically what we're doing is we're putting the salt onto the paint, and the salt chunk will absorb the water around it, and it leaves these little white kind of spots on your paint, because it's quite difficult to leave anything white when you're painting with watercolor, because the layers just very easily start to go on top of each other, and the water is kind of difficult to control. So we get our chunky salt. Seems like a good amount. And I will just sprinkle this on here. And we will have to let it dry, and we will come back to it and I will show you what happens. The other thing I wanted to show was how you can make texture with sponges. So I have here taken off a chunk of this regular kitchen sponge, and I've kind of ripped into it. So I cut here where it was coming off, but then for the bottom I just ripped it off, and you kind of pick at it, because this sponge is the holes are much smaller in this sponge compared to the art sponges that we can buy here. You can see the holes in this one are much bigger, so they make a lot more texture. But this one is compact, so you have to make the holes yourself. So I just pick at them a little bit, give them some definition and whatnot. And then we get our paint, which I'm just going to make a little bit more moist. We'll use a different color maybe. Here's a pink. So we dampen it. Might even put a little bit of a layer down. And I lightly dip my sponge into it. Do you see how only parts of it are picking it up from the texture I've created by picking at it? And then we can start to just play around with it. I love this type of art because it's not very controlled. A lot of art classes are about controlling and getting things accurate, and this is a lot more about having fun with it and seeing if you can feel your way around where you want to end up instead of picking it before you even start your painting. So yeah, it's quite nice to layer different colors on top of each other. You can make some really nice effects with this. I'll show you later. I'm going to make some grass with this because grass is quite annoying to draw every blade of. So this is a nice easy way of getting past that. Here where you can see where the water was wet, it's kind of blended into it. So if you're starting with a wet page, you won't get all of this nice grainy texture. But if that's what you want, I mean, go ahead and use water and you will get these cool kind of patches around it. Yeah, you can make whatever shapes you want with this. You can make it larger, smaller, whatever you please. This is the arrangement I've come up with. I like to arrange the flowers on the page before I cut it, and I just mark out where I want to trim it, just to make sure that I have enough paper for what I want to do. So yeah, useful step. So we can take this off. I've decided to do a top and bottom border for this. And I also wanted to show you this test piece of paper that I did. So when I'm working with flowers, it's very easy to get the colours wrong because the colours of the flowers tend to be so particular. So these are very muted. We have a lot of browns and gold tones. So I wanted to stick with that in the colours that I chose. So I like this kind of, I don't know, splotchy golden mess that I've made there. And I think the pink flowers will really bring some nice colour into it. Not sure if I will keep the green yet, but we will see how it goes. And I am using the piece of paper that was better quality in the first test shot. I didn't want to use the watercolor paper because I actually found it doesn't react very well with the salt. For some reason it makes weird, I don't know, weird patchiness that isn't what the weird patchiness that I want from it. So yeah, let's get started. I've got my water and my paintbrushes. So when I'm doing a background, I really like to use bigger brushes that hold more water, just so that you can get a good cover. So as you saw at the start, my flower arrangement is mostly going to be at the top. So I'm going to concentrate what I'm adding and the kind of texture on the bottom so that you can actually see it. I've mixed already the colours that I want, so I have this golden tone next to me, and I'm going to start dabbling it in. I wet the center of the page so that it would do that that kind of softer effect. As you saw before, where it's dry, it creates very, very precise dots. But if the paper is already wet, it just kind of fades in and it blends and it makes this really nice kind of gradient. That's quite nice. So just to intensify everything a little bit, I'm going to take some more of this yellow, I think it's yellow ochre, and just stamp it along the middle. I think this is also where I'm going to use the salt. So my plan was to add little patches of green and then place the salts around there. I'll show you some more of my work later, but I like this kind of abstract, just playing with shape and textures thing. I do some planning, as you saw in the sheet. For example, the flower shapes, I could not get them down. This one, for example, it had all of those little bits of salt and it made all those little dots. These ones came out better, but I just decided to not use the salt in the flowers because, I don't know, I kind of like the way they look with this clean, sharp outline. And I might use some colouring pencil on them later. We will see how it goes. So yeah, I'm just popping in the green tone. Now, it's actually very easy to do kind of tie-dye type things with watercolors because all the colors just blend in so well. I think I actually have one here. So the drawings are whatever, but you can see in the background I did this kind of yellow and blue tie-dye effect, and I did this by spraying all of it with water and then drawing the shapes into it with each tone. And yeah, because it was already wet, it just kind of dispersed out instead of making a harsh line, which is what I like about working wet on wet. So because we want the salt to be noticeable, I am using kind of a darker tone, just so that it really, you know, the effect of it is really visible. Because if you use very watery colors, it just won't show up as well. So you can already see how it's starting to, it's starting to lift up color around it. I really like that because it just adds variation to what I've put down. Otherwise it's all just one block of color. I'm gonna go back in with the yellows where I want some brighter color. I should wait until the green has dried, but I am an impatient woman. And I am kind of spreading it out at the top because, like I said, the flowers are going to be there. So we just want something for them to stand against. We don't want to take away from them too much. Sometimes I mix brown into colors as well. For example, to make that pink tone, I mixed green into it. And it seems like a weird color to mix in, but it really does unify everything. For some reason your eye picks up on the fact that it has something in it like similar to the other colors on the page. So the pink won't look green, but it does kind of have the same tone as the green and the yellow. I also put a little bit of green in the yellow so that again it unifies everything. It's coming out quite nice. I don't really like this hard edge happening here, so I'm going to try and stipple on some more color. When I'm picking up colors on the sponge, I actually just put it directly on the sponge. I just dip it into my little watercolor pan. And sometimes I dip the sponge directly into the water before as well, just because I find that it works better than trying to, I don't know, spray your sponge or whatever other method you can do. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm going to let it dry and then I can add more textures in the middle because the page is kind of warping. So it's very difficult right now to get anything happening up here because the water just slides down. So hopefully as this dries, it'll get straightened out again. In the meantime, I thought I would show some other things I've done with these techniques. This is a pretty big one. As you can tell, I was really frustrated when I made this. I just needed something tedious to do that would occupy my mind for a long time. So these lines worked very well for that. But if you look behind them, you can see the salt texture. All of this kind of grainy blueness comes from me just putting on a lot of salt. And I have found that if you kind of make a big area, you can see the effect more clearly. Like on the flowers, when I was trying to do it, it made really small patches because there wasn't much water for it to dry in. But when you're working with something big like this, it makes really cool details and just very nice texture that I really enjoy. This is one that kind of shows the sponging. So I wanted to make flames, and again you can see I used the tape for the border. This is why you have to take the stickiness off. I don't know if you can see, but it ripped up some of my paper here. I had to stick it back down. But yeah, again, it's super simple. This was pretty much just me putting layer and layer and layer of sponge paint. So I started with the yellow color because it's lightest, and I actually used acrylic as well, which is these red bits. That's how they're so vibrant. I think the black might be acrylic too. And I even put glitter in it. I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but some of the black bits have glitter because why not throw glitter into everything? The little person is cut out of just some paper, some card paper that I had lying around. But again, you could use just a colored sheet. You could make your own print or design or something for it. And yeah, I just think it makes really, really cool texture. Now, the one that probably not a lot of people are going to want to do, but that I thought was worth a mention just to show how unconventional you can get. Here is one where I actually used hair. So I have longer hair now and I haven't had it in years. And I kept pulling up these horrible clumps out of the shower. And I'd seen other work before that involved hair. So I just kind of decided to give it a go one day. I cleaned it off. I kind of had to style it in this circle shape. But I think it looks really pretty. I mean, it's just not something you see very often, you know, and it's fun to play with, something completely new that you haven't done before. So yeah, there are some ideas of what you can do or things that you could brainstorm for later. So I'm gonna let this dry and we'll be back to put on another layer. My page is fully dried now. I've taken off the salt, and again, it just doesn't do the same thing as it does when you're working on something big. As you saw in the blue painting I did, it works so much better when you have a lot of water for it to soak up. This is made just some very collected salt marks, so the salt soaks it up so much that it makes the outline of the shape of the rock. So I mean, if you're doing rocks or something, it will be useful. But we will find a way to work with it. That's what I like about these type of paintings, that there's no plan, so nothing is a mistake. So I'm mixed in this brown tone, and I put again the green in it and a little bit of yellow so that it looks like it belongs here. And I'm stamping it over the marks we made because again, I want a lot of texture at the bottom and I want it to fade into the top. So you can see here now it's making some really nice texture marks. I'll zoom you in. I put on the flash. It's a little bit wet, so I don't know how well you can see that. But everything happening here, really enjoying. I think the salt underneath it just really, it's about the layers, you know. You see the first layer here, which was the water we put, then we put the green on top, then the salt, and then we just stippled on some brown. So we've really built up some depth to it. I am again going to let this dry, and once it has dried, I might draw on some flowers. You'll see I used some coloring pencil on them. I didn't want to completely outline them, so what I did is I kind of brought it in, and then when it came to the petal I just faded it out because I outlined this petal fully and I didn't really like the way it looked. It just looked kind of too out of place with everything that's very soft, but it works really nice for just defining the petals inside. So yeah, we'll see what we do with that when this is finished drying. It is fully dry now, so I am going to start adding in the flowers. As I said, I mix in kind of a pink rosy tone with just a hint of an earthy green, just to keep all the colors unified. So I've mixed in some of it and I have this much smaller brush now compared to the other ones. And I can just start seeing where I would like to place little flowers. That is much smaller than I originally planned for it to be. But it looks kind of cute, so we'll stick with it. Some people like the, well, I suppose it depends on your mood really as well. Sometimes you want to work on a giant piece of paper and just go ham on it. And sometimes you want to do these kind of small details. I find it very much depends on how I'm feeling or what I'm trying to get out of it. Because I do enjoy just going into the zone and doing these kind of repetitive small tasks. The flowers don't actually have any pink on them, but I thought it would be nice to bring some color into it, just because otherwise it all kind of gets very, I don't know, muddy. I don't think the flowers are going to stand out much against the background, because again, I chose these colors because they're like the flowers. But yeah, just by adding in some pink in the back, it'll really distinguish it as the background. Watercolors always dry lighter, so these ones were kind of getting lost in the brown, so I just added more paint to them, a more opaque paint, just so that they really pop against the background colors. It's very much reminding me of autumn, of falling leaves and petals everywhere from trees shedding. That's what I like about this abstract kind of art as well, is that even if you don't set out with an idea, a lot of the times you end up with an idea somewhere along the way. It doesn't really matter if you didn't set out to do it, but it starts to resemble something that you like, and that gives it value, at least to you. Again, you could use coloring pencils for something like this, because I do think they're a little bit easier to work with, because you can sharpen them and it's much more control. And I imagine if you're not used to holding a paintbrush, this could be a little bit tricky, but it just takes patience and going easy on yourself. I really like these little flowers. I think they were a good idea. And again, I keep kind of bringing this back just to see what it's all going to look like together. So the flowers look they're standing out a lot right now. So what I might do is draw some more sheer ones. So I'm just adding more water to the color I've mixed. And that'll make it less opaque. Make it look like they're not all kind of at the same place, if that makes sense. Like some are further away, some are closer. Gives them some depth. The kind of watery ones, I think they would be further away. I'm actually not sure, but let's go with it. Why not? So I'm just going to draw them a little bit smaller. And the nice thing about drawing anything kind of small is that you don't have to be as precise about it. You can just kind of slap a shape down, and if it vaguely resembles the thing, it's okay, because it's too small for anyone to notice. My hope for this video is that you can even have this on in the background while you paint, and it can be like we're painting together, because actually that's how I paint a lot of the time. It just feels like nice company, and I like hearing other people's kind of perspectives on what they're doing and how they go about doing it. So it would be really interesting if you do paint something. Let me know in the comments or post a picture and maybe tag Seeding the County, because I would like for this to be a co-project, not just me showing you how to paint, but you also painting for yourself and figuring out what you like. I've been painting for a long time, not professionally or anything, just my mom got me paints when I was very young and I kind of haven't stopped since. And I just find it really therapeutic. Helps me a lot in focusing and mindfulness, and just puts me in a really good mood. Can you see how there's so much more depth now that we have these lighter ones and the darker ones? It varies the whole flower thing so much more. There are some spaces that I've left pretty blank. I think just because I can't really see the flowers in the center part, I didn't put many. So we will change that. Like I said, the nice thing about these smaller ones is that it doesn't really have to be super precise. Like, look, that was just me touching the brush into the page and it made a pink spot, and that's enough. That's enough of an indicator that a flower is there. I don't need to draw every single petal. And also, I think it adds to the grainy texture. I didn't want to sponge pink onto it because I think it would have, we would have lost the pink and it would have just blended in with all the other colors we've done. But by using the brush and still kind of doing this spotting, it gives the same effect without losing the pink. Cool. That is looking very meadow now, isn't it? Oh, I like it. Okay. So I think the flowers will look good with it. Yeah, see, the tones are quite similar. I did one earlier and I love painting sunsets. So I painted a sunset, but then I realized the colors in a sunset and the colors in these flowers, no way, shape, or form similar. So I had to scrap that idea because they looked so out of place against the rainbow background that I'd made. And that's why I was like, okay, we have to go back and do your test paper, because as much as I hate doing the test paper sometimes, I'm always thankful that I did it when it comes down to actually doing the painting. So I will let this dry, and we will come back and see what the finished thing looks like. I'm going to stick down the flowers as well, take off the tape, and we should have a finished painting. But here is the finished piece. I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but I really like making thank you cards for people because I find such a nice little personal touch to give someone a handmade thank you card. So this one is for you for watching along and listening to me ramble about art things. I just wanted to mention really quickly that I usually use super glue to stick down things to my paintings because it's quick and handy. But again, going back to why testing is so important, I tested it on this piece of paper and it made it go all see-through. And this is dried now and it's still like that. It's like when you put oil on brown paper and it just makes it translucent. So I had to go with the trusty PVA glue. Again, just a reminder that testing things out, while annoying, it does save you a lot of hassle in the long run. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it inspires you to make your own little art piece. And thank you for watching.